Hey everybody, it's Rob Scheer, the founder of Comfort Cases and the host of Fostering Change. You know what? I want to say thank you and welcome to season 7. Season 7, I can't believe it's here. Do me a big favor. I really want you to listen. I want you to comment, and I definitely want you to subscribe. So I hope you enjoy this season as much as I've enjoyed our guests. Well, you know what? It's so exciting. We have another episode of Fostering Change. What a month has this been? First of all, I have to again thank every single person that came out to our 12th gala. You know, it's hard to believe that this month our organization is 13 years old. We've done 12 galas. We knocked it out of the park again because so many giving people. You know, I could never thank each and every one of them enough. Sorry if I didn't have an opportunity to get to your table to speak to you, but I do want you to know that you were seen, and I do appreciate the fact of the love and support that you're giving kids who are entering our foster care system. And then, as you know, this old man turned 59 just several days ago, and I want to thank everybody who jumped on Facebook and donated to my Facebook fundraiser for Comfort Cases again. You know, we're a 96% volunteer run charity. And every single time that you open up your wallet, you open up your heart, you open up the time that you have, you truly are making an impact for a child who's entering our foster care system. You know, as the year is winding down, I continuously think about this time of year. You know, this time of year was when I actually, at the age of 18, was handed my trash bag and became homeless. You know, one of the statistics that we see and we are still seeing, and the fact that this happened 40 years ago this month. 40 years ago, I became that statistic as a child being homeless on the streets of Northern Virginia with my trash bag, and decided that that is not the path that I wanted to go. You know, I am so excited about my next guest. You know, I have the absolute privilege of hosting this podcast for its 7th season. You know, I also am beyond humble that this podcast has been chosen not one, not twice, but 3 years as the top podcast when it comes to foster care and adoption. And whenever I have an opportunity to have a guest who truly has walked the walk, who truly understands what it's like to be in the system, what it's like to be that number, what it's like to know that what you hear, you actually lived it, but then to come out of it and truly make an impact within your life. You know, I said this before. When I was fortunate enough to sit on the couch with Kathy Lee Gifford, Kathy looked at me and she said, "You know, Rob," she said, "you need to write a book." And at that point, my memoir had not come out, but she said, "But I think you should take the title and make it Pain into Purpose." Well, Derek Jeter did not allow me to have that particular title. But you know what? The fact is that it is true. We are people who are in the system, and we do want to make our pain into purpose. And my next guest, that's exactly what she did. So, Susan, welcome to Fostering Change.
Hi, thank you very much for having me on. I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here, and that was quite an introduction. Thank you for
Well,
that.
well, Susan, I will tell you, I am in awe by anyone and everyone who's gone through what you and I have gone through, and we come out on the other side and not be the statistics. As you know, and by the way, everybody, you know, Susan is an attorney. You're an attorney who actually sits in the trenches fighting for kids in our foster care system. Before we jump into this, I'd love for you to let our viewers and our listeners know what drove you to be an attorney. For, you know, helping those who truly need us. And what is some of your story?
What drove me to being an attorney was sitting in the courtroom and looking at all of the players that sit around that table, and I call it Ring Around the Rosie now. But at the time, I looked around and it seemed that the people that had the authority to speak the most for what I wanted them to say was the DCF attorney in that particular circumstance. And I looked at her and I was like, well, I'll be her one day and I'm going to go back and I'm going to change all of this. But I had the opportunity because I demanded it. And so I focus now on this moment in my life where I demanded to be present at the table. I never wanted to hear it from secondhand how somebody else heard it. I wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth. And that's what I fight for today still. So I wanted to be that attorney, but I also wanted to change. everything about how it's all done. And, I thought I was going to do it through that process, but I ended up doing it through being an attorney. And then once I left the system, I actually was a child abuse investigator and I did those removals and I worked in child welfare and I've been an attorney for the state and I've done those things. And then now I have my private practice and it's all about me right now for the voice of the children because I demanded to have it. And if you'll indulge me, the story that changed
Yes, yes.
this for me is, and a lot of people who listen to my own podcast or know me personally, they have heard this before, but this is it for me. And I think this is why I feel the way that I do, and that will never change. And I've said it and I'll say it until I'm dead. That when I sat around the table and I kept hearing myself referred to as the child because I insisted on being there and hearing it, and I'm right next to the judge. And I was so blessed to be in that circumstance in the first place, to be able to have that type of interaction, in chambers, around a table, an intimate setting. But when they kept calling me the child, I actually slammed my hand on the table and I said, "My name is Susan. And you're talking about me as if I'm not even here. And this is my life. I am not just the child. I am Susan." And I knew that my mother was not capable. Either she was born without the skills or she made very bad choices and aligned herself the way she shouldn't have with my abuser. But I always knew that something was missing. And I looked at them and I said, "You want to send me home so bad?" And I listened to your podcast about the focus of reunification. And I agree. And this is why I fight for children's voices. I looked at them and I said, "Isn't there some sort of, I don't know, evaluation that you can do on her to show that she doesn't have what it takes to be a parent?" I learned later that's called a parental capacity, right? And they said, "Well, actually, yes." And they listened to me, they did it, and they determined at that moment that I didn't have to go home. And that moment is what made everything for me my purpose.
So, Susan, how old were you?
And it's hard for me because you know how those memories are
Yeah,
distorted
yeah.
and
No,
the
I
pain
get it.
that goes along with it. I was probably 12 or 13 years old at the
Wow.
time.
Yeah,
Very, very young, but not young enough where children shouldn't have an opportunity to speak. And
exactly.
that's my other hot button.
I think it's a big, and by the way, I'm a dad. My husband and I, we have adopted 5 kids out of the foster care system, and I never once did anything change from one child to our 5th child. And our 5th child, by the way, he was adopted as what they call an adult adoption. He arrived at my home at the age of 18, been in the system, most of his life, and just place after place. The reason I bring that up is because I absolutely was appalled, and for somebody who grew up in the system and aged out, is how much it hasn't changed. And by the way, the system is not broken, Susan. It's shattered. It's absolutely shattered. And for me, when you sit in that judge's chambers around the table, and you've got your guardian of items, you have your casas, you've got your attorneys, moms and dads have their attorneys, and you're sitting there and you're thinking they are making decisions based on a file, okay, and not based on that person, that child, who, by the way, has a name, and who, by the way, has a voice. They have a voice. And, I'm so happy to know that you were sitting there and was able to hear your voice because I do think we need to open up the door and allow children to come and sit because this is their life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And when you say the system is shattered, there are parts and, there are things that need to be fixed. There are things that re-traumatize children. I very much agree with removals when they can stay in the home and, all of those things. That's why I left the department to begin with. But there are very good things about what the department does. And I call it the department here because that's what it's called in Florida, the Department of Children and Families, but not for them. Let's not forget, I would still be in the system,
Right.
right? So I have to give credit where credit's due. I know that there are a lot of things that don't happen, but the laws in Florida have been written that children are a party. They have been written that children are to be notified of every hearing and given the opportunity. But often the court determines off the cuff that it's in their best interest not to hear the truth, not
Right.
to hear what's happening in their case. And off the cuff, they're already deciding it's best for the child not to miss school. and these things, where that's not how I feel about it. I think children are not stupid. I think children know their parents better than anybody else on this planet. And as much as I know that their love clouds a child's judgment and just that want to go home sometimes, but I also believe that lying to children throughout the process and all of a sudden when things are not going well, oh, you're up for adoption. Are you okay with being adopted? And they had no idea that they were never going
That's why
home.
they're so angry. They're
And
so,
they are, and they're
they have every
disappointed.
right to be angry.
Absolutely. And then they act out, and then it's, oh, well, this child's, a trouble and needs different placements. And then the cycle continues in that manner whenever if the child had the opportunity to be given that voice. And another thing that I want to say where the system is set up to do this is a guardian ad litem is, can express the wishes of a child. I advocate for attorney ad litems because although, in my opinion, a guardian ad litem is very necessary to protect the best interests of the child and to advocate for that. And if they disagree with the department, they have authority so that they can do things. But a child as a party can have an attorney, and that attorney can further and advocate for what that child believes is A, in their best interest, and A, what they wish to happen with their case. That is the only attorney in that
Yeah.
arena that has that client, that child as their client. And that's where I feel very passionately. I'm going through a lot of things right now in the state of Florida where, the attorney ad litems for the children that are coming in specifically for the children are being pushed out by other players in the courtroom because they think they have it handled and how could a kid consent and all these other things. But children are a party and they have a right to participate and have a voice because they don't deserve to not be treated with the same respect and rights as every other parent and person in that room. And I feel so strongly about that. And I also bring that into my family law cases. And there's a lot more. And I know we talk about dependency and that's what your focus is, but that's why I also practice family law because dependency and family law, when you have parents that are having issues with children, you've got to put the children's best interests first. What are their needs? The same as independency. And if the parents are unhealthy, I want to help the
Right.
parents parent in a healthy way. And so there's a lot of overlap with that, but children don't get the voice in family that they do in dependency. It's not written in. It's if they're of sufficient age and maturity, they can give a preference. They can't say that I want to be here because there's domestic violence. They
Right.
can't say
Right.
why they want to, so I'm working on that. I want the children to have the voice in all aspects. And in my practice, the reason why I started it, and I don't know if you know this, but I wanted to show this to you. I got my trademark. Okay, so this is if I cry, I'm sorry. I'm proud of being the attorney that I get to be without anybody telling me what I can and can't do for a kid because I'm going to make it up if I can't do it because you said I can't. I'm going to make up a way to do it. But then I've done so much with my podcast and making my practice so welfare focused that I got trademarked for my child welfare legal team. And I own it and it's mine. And I'm a foster kid and I just owned my first tree 2 years ago, when I first got my first home on my own.
That's
So
amazing.
it feels good.
You
I
should
feel
be
like
so
God gave me a
proud of yourself.
purpose.
You should
I'm
be
proud
so
of
proud.
that. I'm
Yeah.
proud of that, but I don't agree with some things where children are assumed to be failures. I was called the rose in foster care because I wasn't out doing the things that typical foster children do. But you're an avid reader. I read 3 paperbacks a day when I was a kid, and I lived in a different fantasy world of
Right.
books, escaping my reality. But I learned what to do, what not to do, what expectations are, what society standards are, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, what drugs do to you. I learned all of that in books. And I knew that I was in charge of myself all along, and so are these kids, but they don't feel empowered.
They don't feel it. And I very much was like you. I was a kid who threw myself into books so I could not have to look at what was around me. And
Yes.
I'm the youngest of 10 kids, so
Oh my.
I saw my brothers and sisters doing exactly what they expected of them when they put the F word in front of their names. Teenage pregnancy, incarceration, drug addiction, all of those things that they say that we, and I remind people at the end, they created us. They created us. They truly
They did.
created us.
They
And
did.
I feel, and you know, I really would love your opinion on this. So I feel like foster care, when a child enters foster care, we've already failed them. I have yet to figure out why, when we look at the statistics, over about 64% of kids come in for the word neglect. Neglect is no more than poverty. Why can't we send someone into the family and stabilize the family? Why can't we, give them parenting classes, help them out before the child is taken? Why can't we take the perpetrator who is, abusing and remove them out of the situation? I just feel like there's so much more we can do instead of just yanking the children out of their family of origin without truly a true investigation.
Well, first, I want to say if you have the right advocates in place, a lot of that can be done differently. I There are some distinctions with where I practice that I was thinking about it because listening to your program, I've thought of this question. And the true answer to that is there are systems in place where if the department goes out, they can give someone a voluntary case plan, a voluntary opportunity to do services and give them the help they need in the home before they put them in foster care. And they do that a lot. They just don't talk about it because it's voluntary and it's not, hold on. Then also, right, if it has to be a removal, for example, in a domestic violence
Yeah,
situation, which I very much disagree with, now we have Chapter 39 injunctions under the Florida statute where they can get the perpetrator out of the home, get the mother the services that she needs, and then it avoids foster care. There are ways, and with the right people in place in those agencies, those things can happen. And when they don't, is when we need court advocates to come in like me and say, this is not the least restrictive means or the least restrictive
right,
alternative, and then advocate for something in the interim, right? Because when a child is sheltered, the burden of proof is it's that the department tried everything. Now,
right,
poverty sometimes is one of those things that is cyclical, and unless a parent can break the cycle
right.
as well, right?
Yeah. No,
And
I
so
agree. I
I
agree.
understand, and ultimately, I have to confess to you right now that question, the answer to it is why I stopped being a child abuse investigator because I did not want to remove children who cost the state more money by going to foster care, which is a trauma in and of itself, rather than giving that money to the parent who went to work and left a child, or fell asleep on the railroad tracks because she's tired and, all those
Yeah.
things, than leaving the child there because that's less trauma to the child and more
Right.
opportunity to break the cycle. But that's why I left the state. But being in the courtroom, I see there are other opportunities. But to be fair, those opportunities have to be taken
They
by
do.
the person who is being
Exactly.
offered those opportunities.
And let's
Every
be
case
honest.
that I'm involved in, the parents are given opportunities unless it's an extreme situation. And sometimes they should have been, and I fight for they should have been. And sometimes they shouldn't have been because some children do belong in foster care. And that's the truth.
No,
You
I
can't
agree.
deny it,
Susan, let me tell you something.
right?
I agree with you on that part, and I agree with but something I want to throw in here. People ask me because I am literally last year I spent 180 nights and 189 nights in hotels. So I'm in every state talking
Ooh.
to child welfare offices, turn.
Hmm.
And the thing that people ask me all the time, would you ever say there's a state that's actually doing it right? And not just because you're in Florida, and not just because I mean, because I'm based in the state of Maryland. I always bring up the state of Florida, and the reason for that is during my investigating of where things are in place of those nets, Florida seems to have the majority of that. They seem to really have supporting of the children when they're aging out. I mean, the fact that they will stand next to these kids up to the age of 26 in Florida, the fact that as you just talked about, there's so much support for the family before. I'm telling you, we're not seeing that in other states, by the way, Susan. It's
Well, that's a travesty.
yeah, all the
That
states are
really
doing it
is.
different. They're all doing it different. I mean, we have these boomerang kids where,
And we have these problems that you
well,
have.
yeah, but
They're not unavoidable.
no,
And
they're not. They're not unavoidable whatsoever. But I also feel, as you said, you know, children are not pawns. And I am so tired of kids having to sit there while parents are trying to be adults. And I do believe that there should be a time limit. I believe that there needs to be a time limit. And I feel that after 12 months of your child being in foster care, if you have not taken advantage of all the things that we're offering on the table, these children deserve for permanency. They deserve to know that there is someone there that's going to be with them from 6 all the way to 66. And that is called a family. And I just feel that we just continue to prolong these children in a system, and there is no reunification. And if it is a reunification, it's the most unhealthiest reunification there is. And children deserve to get on with their life.
I agree with you. And we have 12 months to permanency as our goal in the state of Florida. And maybe that's why you speak of us often. Um, it's an individual case by case basis, and a lot of times, sometimes, families have 7 children that need to be reunified, and to reunify all at one time would be a mistake. So, it really depends. It depends on if the providers are making the referrals on time. Some of these tasks that people are supposed to do are very lengthy and intense, and if they don't get started late for whatever reason, but you can extend that. And I am very much, everything I do is about the child. So, if
Right.
I'm trying to get the goal to permanency, however, I also represent parents in this because parents deserve the opportunity in poverty, or they've never had access to mental health, or, sometimes you mentioned in one of your episodes that someone needed a ride to their drug treatment,
Right.
and you
Yeah.
were a foster parent and you
Yep.
gave that parent a ride and you increased visits so that the parent could get more visits. A lot of time parents need more support in the process too if you want them to get it done within that time frame, and that's where the system fails. Like, you can say throwing services at them is support, but that's not true. They need a lot more than that. And when parents, and I want to put this out there, I'm saying this for truth. Parents go through trauma as well. And when you're being traumatized by having your family ripped apart for either reasons you can or cannot help, mental health, sometimes you can't help unless you have the right resources. Sometimes you need help, right? And being judged isn't necessarily
Mhm.
helpful either.
Yeah.
They're all humans. And that's why I represent grandparents, children, parents, yeah, cousins, everybody in this type of child welfare system, foster parents, people who want to adopt, whoever it is. If it's in the child's best interest, that is who I advocate for to get to the child's best interest.
No, I agree with you. And the thing is that, I've seen this firsthand being, we have adopted two sets of siblings and then one young, our oldest son, and the thing is that I do like we have two kids that I feel like they should have never come to foster care. And that's why I'm so happy that we have a very close relationship with the birth parents and, with the aunts and uncles and grandparents. And then I have another set of kids who, um, they shouldn't have floundered in the system as long as they did before we adopted them. And that's the thing that we need to understand is that and I love what you said, every case is different because you know what? Every child is different. We're all
And
not.
that's what I meant. Every single facet of every single case is different. Every kid's different, every parent is different, every service available is different. The caseworker working with them is different. But what you're doing though is you're personally investing into these parents as in your role in the system as a caregiver, right? That is not necessarily your responsibility, and I don't want to take that from you, but that's the system's
Right.
responsibility. That's not yours. That's the failings of the system to talk about.
And
And I applaud you for that.
I think,
Thank you
and
for
and
that.
I always say to Reese, I always say I never want our kids to look back and say, "Why did you keep us from
Yes.
our
And
parent,
they
our family
will.
of origin?" And so, what I've always raised our kids to do is to remind them that their parents had choices, And I am tired of people saying, "Well, they're a product of their environment." No, they're not.
No,
Product
they're
of
not.
choices. of choices, you know. And I do believe what you said, Susan, is that we do need to support the birth families more. You know, so many times I've spoken to birth families who have kids have come into the system and they feel defeated. They feel that everybody's on this side of the table and they're standing alone,
Oh,
and
they are.
or like throwing things at them. They're, you know, I'll never forget one of our, she says, I don't have the money to take the bus to get to the parenting class. I don't have the money to get to the bus to come to the visit. You know, I'm living in another state. And we do not think about that. We think about, oh, well, we gave them the ability to take that class, or we gave them the ability to show up at
Yes.
this place,
Yes.
1 hour of sterile visits. That's why my husband
In
and I
a controlled environment.
exactly. That's why we petitioned the courts and we were like, listen, allow us to be people to oversee the visits and let us do it at a park. Let us do it on a Saturday afternoon. Let us do it in a time where the children feel relaxed and the parents feel relaxed and they're not stuck in some sterile room
Can
sitting
I
for
ask
an
you though?
hour. Yes,
Can I ask you though? You're going above and beyond what a foster parent, and probably it's because of your experience and the way you want children to feel in this experience, right? I don't know that most foster parents, that's a large ask. That's opening up your home, your life, your heart, and that's a lot when they're already doing that for those children. And they get burned a lot too,
of course.
right?
Of
And
course.
the relationships could be bad. And I know you probably have stories that you can share, but how, let me ask you for you, for this is your podcast, what's your suggestion to other caregivers, foster parents or parents? Some of them are enabling when they shouldn't, but whatever, you know, what's your advice to them to support the parents that are in the process?
I mean, I truly, like you said, every child's different. My husband and I chose to walk into the situation, wanting a relation with the birth parents, immediately letting the birth parents know I'll never forget the first visit that, listen, we're only here for an interim. We're here to support your children, to support you, you know, and we'll never say anything negative, in front of your children because at the end of the day, they're their children. But after, like we went through so many times, you know, we kept seeing, you know, no visits. You know, we'd be sitting at the park. My daughter would be so excited she's going to see her mommy. And 2 hours go by, no phone call, no text, no show, you know. And after so many times of that, it was like, you know, couldn't do it. But what I tell people, caregivers, you know, realize first of all, children have a life story before you walked into that life story. And if you really truly want to support this child, you have to support the birth parents. Whether or not the birth parents follow through, you have to be able to show those children how you lead by example. And leading by example is truly setting all of
Mm,
things aside and truly focusing on what is the healthiest thing for this child. And right now, the healthiest thing for my children, or mine and my husband's children, were to go those visits, you know. But after so many visits that nobody showed up, the kids started going, I'm not going. They're not going to show up, or maybe they do. And so they start, and by the way, they were young, but they had their own, they knew it, they knew it. Listen, Susan, first of all, this is the longest podcast I've had. And I
I'm
could
sorry.
continue. No, I could continue to talk. I mean, you're just,
You
I,
can if you want.
you
You
are
can.
just unbelievable. Listen up, everybody. Susan actually has her own podcast. It's called Care to Family Law, a Child Welfare Focus. We're going to have a link right here. I truly want you to tune in. Susan, you are truly what I call an angel on earth.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
because you're putting everything aside and focusing on what's so important, and that's our children. You know, I say this so many times. Children in foster care don't belong to you. They don't belong to me. They belong to us. They belong to us. And I think it's important, and I think it's truly our legacy to make sure that we give as much as we possibly can to our leaders of tomorrow. And children in foster care, there are a lot of leaders in there. There's a lot of
Hmm.
Susans in there and a lot of
And a
Robs
lot
in
of
there
you.
that
Yeah.
really believe in themselves when nobody else believed in them. Susan, I got one last question to ask you. If you
Yes,
could do
sir.
it, if you could do it and change one thing in foster care today, take effect today, what would that change be?
Mhm. Keeping the kid fully informed with the truth all along the way.
I am so glad you
No lies. No
I'm so
lies.
glad you said that. You're the first one who's ever made that because I agree 120,000% with you is that we continue. You want to know why kids are so angry by the time they hit
Because
16?
they're
Because
lied
we have
to.
lied to them from the beginning.
False
And
hope.
yep, lost hope, lost respect, lost everything, and they're just a folder. Just
Hmm.
a folder. And you know
Hmm.
as well as I do, they have so many social workers in and out of their lives. Some of them have so many placements. They have every right to feel that we have failed them because, in my opinion, many times we have. Many times we have. Listen, everybody, this is one of those ones that I'm going to have to go back and say, wow, this has got to be a top 10 of the best.
Oh, thank you so much.
Amazing. Susan,
That's
you
that's
truly
very nice.
are unbelievable. And I
Well,
love
thank
you.
you.
And I can't, so you cover the entire state of Florida?
I do. I
Okay.
do. I travel anywhere they want me to go.
Listen up, everybody. You reach out to me all the time. You know, if you're in Florida, we are big, big supporters of the state of Florida. We get thousands and thousands and thousands of cases. And by the way, I have a son who goes to Lynn University in Boca. So,
Oh, nice.
and
That's very
I
close.
have my honorary doctorate from Lynn. And so, Florida is a very, very special place in my heart. But I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Well, I
And
hope I get
everybody,
to meet you soon.
oh, yes, yes, we'll make that happen. Guys,
Yes, sir.
another amazing episode.
Thank you very
Can't
much.
thank you enough. And until next time, remember, each and every one of us have an opportunity to be a part of the change. Be a part of the change. And the change is making sure tomorrow is better than it is today. So go out there and be a good human. Take care, everyone.